What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Now, I know I haven't posted in a while. I've just been going through some personal things, but regardless, I'm going to be starting to post a lot more frequently. Now, in today's video, I'm going to be doing step-by-step process and how we're going to be turning our Concord grapes into jam. So without further delay, let's get into the video. So here are the tools you're going to need to get started. We're going to need your choice of jars. These are 8-ounce mason jars. Now this recipe is gonna work with both 8-ounce jars and 16-ounce jars. So if you're using anything bigger than that, you're gonna need to adjust this recipe. You're also gonna need a jar lifter and this Headspace tool. This is gonna help us measure how much of our jam to put into the jar, which I'll go over later on. And at the other end of this tool is a bubble remover, which I'll too go over later. And of course a proper funnel to fit your specific jar. This funnel specifically is a wide mouth funnel.
At school, they put this sticker on his back that says wide load.
A large enough pot for your jars. Note, your jars will need to be submerged in water that covers them by at least 1 inch, so make sure your pot is tall enough. And a rack, which will keep your jars upright and elevate them so they are not touching the base of the pot. A thermometer. This one is a candy thermometer that attaches to your pot. A fine mesh wire strainer. And a large sized pot. Before we get things started, you're going to want to start with clean dishes and utensils. You might be tempted to skip this step, but don't.
Is it dirty?
Oh, no, don't worry, I'm gonna wash it.
Don't. I like it dirty.
That's your call.
Now that we got things cleaned up in the kitchen, I want to quickly take you outside. I have this RV filter here on my outside hose, and I'm going to be filling the canning pot with the filter water to help with mineral buildup. If you have canned before using hard water, you might have noticed a cloudy-like substance on the jars when pulling them out of the water bath. That cloudy substance is mineral buildup. This buildup is not harmful and it is not a food safety issue. However, it can make the jam or other canned foods visually unappealing.
So you're saying she does not have an alibi?
Well, no.
Okay, so we've established she ain't got no alibi. She ugly. She ugly. U-G-L-Y. She ain't got no alibi. She ugly.
Screw off.
If you don't have filter water to use, then you can instead add 1 cup of white vinegar to the water in your canning bath that will help eliminate that buildup. Then we can go ahead and add our empty jars to the bath, put on medium heat, and bring to a simmer with the lid on. To be exact, bring your water to 180 degrees Fahrenheit and keep at that temperature till you're ready to use the jars. So it's going to be a while till our large pot of water reaches the proper temp, so it's time to pick our grapes. As the thumbnail mentioned, these are Concord grapes. This grapevine is 4 years old and I've harvested twice since its original planting date. This variety is seeded, which we'll have to remove before starting the jam. Now this variety still has green grapes that haven't fully ripened, so I'm going to try and avoid picking those, but if I end up getting some, I'm going to be separating them from the jam recipe. Now I'm no expert when it comes to training grapevines. Right now I have it growing over a dog kennel that I laid fencing wire where the roof used to be. Now I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing next year in terms of training, so if anyone has any suggestions, please leave them in the comments. So I picked right around 4 pounds of grapes, which is what the recipe calls for. Now comes the tedious part of cleaning and destemming all the grapes. At this point, some people individually remove the grape skins from each grape, but we're going to go ahead and skip that step.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Next, we're going to carefully add our grapes to the blender and go ahead and blend them nice and fine. This is going to help us remove the stem without having to take them out individually from each grape. We're going to go ahead and use our strainer to strain the blended grapes till all we're left with is grape juice.
Nigga, what the fuck is juice? I want some grape drink, baby.
Then we're going to add 6 cups of sugar. We're going to bring the mixture slowly to a boil, using medium to low heat, stirring until the sugar dissolves. By this time, our jar should have already reached 180 degrees Fahrenheit and be ready to fill. Once the mixture starts to boil, we're going to go ahead and increase the heat to medium-high and cook rapidly to the gelling point of 220 degrees Fahrenheit. The gelling point is the temperature at which the mixture will lose its fluidity and its texture will become gel-like. Since this recipe isn't using pectin, we will need to reach the gelling point before we jar. Now, as we're reaching that gelling point, we're going to need to continuously stir the mixture to prevent sticking. Once you reach 220, you can reduce the heat and perform a spoon test to verify your mixture has become gel-like. Unfortunately, I didn't record this test, but here is a description of what to look for. Take a spoon and scoop some of the mixture from the pot. Once the mixture breaks from the spoon in a sheet or flake, it's now ready to be jarred. Now, if the mixture is still watery, then keep the flame on and continue to cook for another 5 to 10 minutes and test again till it shows the proper sheeting. After that, it's time to jar the jam.
Whoa, jam? I love jam. Hey, how come we never have jam at our place?
Because the kids need new shoes.
Grab a jar from the canning bath with your jar lifter. Make sure not to have any excess water in it. Take your funnel and start filling. Now we're going to be leaving a 1/4 inch headspace. If you don't know, headspace is the unused space inside the jar from the surface of the food, or in this case liquid, to the rim of the jar. The headspace is essential for food expansion and forming a proper vacuum seal with the lids. This is where a headspace tool is going to make things easy. It contains the measurements we need to have the proper amount of headspace. Each one of these steps corresponds to the measurement of space, and this last step would be where the food or liquid needs to touch. So if this recipe called for 1 inch of headspace, we would put the 1 inch step directly on the rim of the jar and fill till we reach the bottom of this last step. But this recipe calls for a 1/4 inch headspace, so we'll be putting the rim of the jar at the 1/4 inch mark and filling till the bottom of the last step. Now that we have the proper headspace, we're going to use the other end of our tool to scrape the inside walls of our jars to remove any bubbles. Removing the bubbles removes any air pockets. Any bubbles or air left in the jar can lead to more headspace than we already measured and potentially cause our jars not to seal properly with their lids. And lastly, we're going to wipe the rims with the damp towel to remove any spilt jam that would also prevent the lids from forming a proper seal. Then we'll add the lids.
Lift your hand. Great, we're almost there. Now put it on the lid. No, the lid. 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 The lid.
We're going to center the lid and adjust the band to fingertip tight to prevent over tightening. And we're going to place the jars back in the water bath and continue this process till we fill the rest of the jars. Now that all our jars are filled, it's time to process them. First, make sure that we have 1 inch of water covering the tops. If necessary, add more water. Then we're going to adjust the heat to medium-high, cover, and bring to a rolling boil. Once they reach a rolling boil, it's time to set the timer. Now the amount of time depends on your altitude. If you live at or below 1,000 feet above sea level, you would process the jars for 15 minutes. But if you're higher than 1,000 feet, you would increase the time as shown on the chart. For my altitude, I live 1,044 feet above sea level. So according to this chart, I would add 5 minutes to the original 15-minute sea level time, which means I would set the timer for 20 minutes. Once the time is up, turn off the flame and let stand for about 5 minutes. Then you can go ahead and remove the jars from the bath. Go ahead and let the jars cool overnight and make sure not to retighten the bands, as this may break the vacuum seal created during the canning process. And here is the finished product. Now all that's left to do is go ahead and label your jars to make sure you know when's the last time you processed them. And also at this point, you don't need the bands anymore since we have that vacuum seal that was made during the canning process. You also want to make sure not to retighten these bands too tight or you'll break that vacuum seal and it'll basically be as if you open the jar. Now with this vacuum seal, it'll last up to 1 year in the pantry. And once you're ready to use it, you can go ahead and pop that seal and go ahead and retighten it and put it back in the refrigerator. And then again, in the refrigerator, it'll also last for up to a year. And that's basically it. We went through the entire process of turning our Concord grapes into jam. So again, I'd like to thank everyone so much for watching and tuning into this episode. If you did like this video, don't forget to throw up the thumbs up. And if you haven't already, you can click the on-screen icon right below me to subscribe. And if you want to check out more content like this, you can click on any of the thumbnails to the side of me. And as I like to let all my viewers know, you won't get a harvest if you don't sow seeds.